Welcome, welcome. So
Welcome from space to a fake Golden Gate Bridge behind me. How you doing?
it's amazing. We look pretty fresh for early morning, I have to say. We both.
Exactly. Yeah.
Chewbacca looks good as well. Uh,
Chewbacca always looks good. He's
yeah,
always taking notes and doing what he needs to do.
yeah. So, Troy, I'm really excited to have you and for our new friendship. And I think we should start because I'm introducing you to my audience. So we should start with like a little, self-introduction. And also, we
Yep.
say that a lot of Eastern European, founders. Actually, this is one of the skills that people need to work on. So this is kind of we are showing it firsthand.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, great. That puts the pressure on. Now I have to do
Yeah, right.
a good overview. But that's true. That is an important thing to know is how to introduce yourself in many different situations. This is a good situation if you're doing media or if you're talking with someone on a stream like this. Yeah, like there's always different ways to do it, but I'll give kind of a short version of my background. So I'll start with my undergraduate degree. It's in Korean, which is kind of interesting. I'm one of the few people on the globe that has an actual bachelor's degree in the Korean language. And after that, I got my business degree, my MBA. And upon graduating from MBA, I started a venture capital fund, which is a fun story, but I won't go into it. But I ran that for 3 years. And it was a great, I call it after my MBA. It was a great
Yeah,
education because I got to see literally hundreds of businesses, meet with a ton of management teams and kind of figure out what works and what doesn't. And I was pretty early in my career. So it was a good educational learning. I've started a couple of businesses after the venture capital fund, and one exited. The other one is still in business down in San Diego, California, and doing really well. In fact, really thriving right now with COVID because they do remote events.
hmm,
And we started it when 9/11 happened here in the United States, when similar situation, the events went away, right? Like nobody was traveling, the air travel system was shut down. So started that then, and now come full
yeah.
circle, it's happened again, and it's thriving. And then let's see, I'm going to put up a couple of logos here. So then I met a guy that actually, a funny story here. This is Phil Libin on the right here. He founder of Evernote, one of the co-founders of Evernote, and was the CEO of Evernote. And he brought me on to really do the international push for Evernote. And it's interesting. This was like in 2012. And at the time, Silicon Valley startups really did not go international because the American market was kind of where the internet was happening and technology was happening. So we didn't really look outside of the US that much at that point. But Evernote kind of became famous for one of the few, or one of the first, I'll say, startups that eventually became a unicorn that went international very, very early in the process. In fact, we only had 60 employees when I started and took it international. And we took it from 10 million users to over 200 million users in the space of 5 years. So that was an
Wow.
amazing ride.
And
After
we all
Evernote,
love Evernote, so we can all relate.
yes.
I've been an Evernote user for I don't know how long. It's one of the favorite programs on my Mac.
Yeah, I think still it has quite a following and it's quite an amazing application. I still use it every day.
Yeah,
Once you get in the habit and understand what Evernote can do, then it's hard to get off.
yeah,
But it's a great company. Absolutely had an amazing experience. Had a great experience with Phil Libin. Learned a ton from him. He and I are the same age, but I learned a ton from him. He is just wicked smart and quite a product oriented CEO. And I just learned a ton from him. He's an amazing guy.
yeah.
After that, I went to Weebly. Weebly kind of recruited me in because they saw what I did with Evernote and wanted me to do the same for them in the international markets. And I went and did that for almost 2 years. And at the end of that, we sold it to Square, the payment processing company, right? A lot of people, everyone knows Stripe. Square is there as well, one of Jack's companies over at Twitter. He's the CEO there. But yeah, so that's kind of where I went with it. And then after Square, after we sold to Square, I actually didn't even stay on at Square. And I left and went back with Phil, and we started he was actually starting up, he's the founder, a product studio, as we call it, where we were, and still are, helping young entrepreneurs figure out how to build world-class products, because young entrepreneurs typically don't have access to the level of engineers, the level of designers that you need to really have a world-class product. So the name of our studio is All Turtles. And actually, it's kind of funny because you and I right now are using an All Turtles product to stream like this and kind of allow me to put up the slides in an elegant way and kind of have like a really cool streaming experience. It's a weird name. It's called Mmhmm.
I love the name and I love the product.
Yeah, exactly. And the concept is because people are on Zoom all the time, et cetera, in the US, in American English, our filler word when you don't know what to say and you're thinking, or I'm sorry, it's not a filler word. It's a filler word for I understand what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. 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 And you say it countless times throughout the day. So we named the product Mmhmm. And it's a really cool product. It got funded by Sequoia, literally without any physical meeting. Phil got on a session like this with the Sequoia partners, and they funded it for $4.5 million, no questions asked. So that was a pretty.
You gotta be Phil to do this such things, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's Phil. Phil is an amazing guy. He's very well connected. He's a very proven entrepreneur. And whenever you're raising money, being a proven entrepreneur is a huge asset. And of course, not what a lot of young entrepreneurs have, but once you have that asset, it makes it easier and easier to raise money.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's my overview. Probably too long, but it gives you an idea. I've been in the SaaS industry now for quite a while. And I would say really my specialty is SaaS companies and taking SaaS companies into the international markets, whether it be Latin America, Asia, Europe.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I know that your other passion and love now is languages and helping people around the world. Yeah, can you talk about this?
Yeah. So that's interesting. And that's kind of how we met, because you're in the language side of things as well with ELK. And so it's interesting. My undergrad is in Korean. I have a big interest in learning language efficiently, especially as it relates to speaking. And I think what I've noticed throughout my whole career, in fact, from a very young age, because I learned Korean when I was 19 and lived in the country for 2 years. And I kind of studied Korean in the, I'll call it the normal way, where you're using textbooks, vocabulary lists, and all this stuff to learn it. But I noticed that a lot of what I was learning was not actually used when I was talking with people. People would say, oh, we don't use that word, or we don't use that phrase. And I became frustrated because you never want to study anything that's not used, right? Like it's just an exercise in futility. So I became very interested in how do I learn things that actually are used in conversation, and came up with a system for learning the Korean language. In fact, I have a cool slide here I can show of these are actual cards. Part of here, I'll come over here. But these are the actual cards that I used when I was talking with people. I would write down phrases they would use that I did not understand in conversation. And then I would look it up that night, study it, and then be able to use it. But the cool thing is that this put me in a situation where 100% of what I was studying was actually used in conversation. So my efficiency went up tremendously. And so I did that way back when and didn't do anything with it. And then later in my career, when I started doing a lot of international work, I have hundreds of friends, colleagues, partner people that I've talked with all over the world that speak English as a second language, much like you and a lot of your community.
Yeah.
And I just noticed that this is a big gap. Like, people are great at emailing and tech, the written word, highly competent, in some cases better than me. But when it comes to the spoken word, really struggle. So I decided during COVID, I noticed I wasn't doing a commute. I wasn't commuting back and forth to work anymore. All my family seemed to be like on Netflix or some streaming service, right?
Yeah.
And it just, the time availability for me just opened up. And I said, hey, now is the time. I've been wanting to do this for about 6 years.
Yeah.
And I said, now is the time that I can actually focus on putting this program together and helping people really learn English in a different way or study English in a different way. And it's focused on people like you or people that are already competent at spoken English, but have, especially in listening, but have trouble speaking. And it's focused on helping executives speak English, business English particularly, more smooth and more comfortably is what it's focused on. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And I see that there's such a need for this. And this is what we've been helping people at ELK Academy. And so I think that's absolutely wonderful to give this. And it's the insight is that it's never about the language itself. People don't learn English just for the sake of English. Yeah, they all want to learn the language to achieve some big goals and to get to their dreams. So I think the fact that you are a Silicon Valley executive who is helping people to express themselves and also navigate, through all this like businessy Western mindset. And culture, I think that's incredibly, that's super cool. And I'm
you actually just gave me an idea of a way to think about it, but it's kind of like a mashup between an MBA and learning English. And when I got my MBA, the way I described it to people is the biggest thing the MBA gave to me was language. As a native English speaker, I didn't know all of the business concepts and lingo. So I think it's kind of like a mashup between, it's a definitely language learning system that's much more efficient than the normal way, but it's focused on business. And it's kind of like getting a little bit of the MBA lingo as well that we use in Silicon Valley every day.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's even more than that. It's not just the way you speak and the words that you're using, but it's also, the energy, the attitude, the emotions, the way you handle the small talk and the conversation and the business calls and Zoom calls, etc. I think this is also like, it so well. And I think consciously or subconsciously, you are like broadcasting this, and this is also can be really helpful to founders. Just to be in this energy and in this mind space and in this speed. And
no, I hadn't thought about that, but I think you're absolutely right. And in my experience with founders from Asia, Europe, and Latin America. I think that outside of the Valley, we tend to be very formal, right? Like a lot of countries, what do you think about like Korea and Japan? Very formal, right? And I think like Mexico as well is like a very formal culture. And I think Silicon Valley is much less formal, but very serious at the same time. It's interesting. It's like less formal, but you better have good ideas. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's very much on the merit of ideas. And as long as you have great ideas, present them with passion, then you're going to succeed. But if you're ultra formal and your ideas kind of suck, you're done, right? So I think focusing on the ideas first is the most important thing. And then even being formal is okay if you have great ideas. But you'll
And
know,
one more thing that I noticed is that
yep,
you can have as an immigrant founder, you can have a great idea, but if you don't know how to communicate it in a
right.
silicon, because no one has time to just like
Yes.
sit there and listen through you like mumbling. People like, I think that's really fast and really sharp and really
Yes.
smart. And if you can't express, well, like you haven't done your homework and you don't have your pitch,
Yes.
again, you're out. You can have like the most brilliant, amazing idea. I see this with our Y Combinator challenge. Now we help founders to, with their applications, and I see incredible. They're like geniuses,
Yeah.
incredible ideas. But when it comes to 1 minute video, it's a disaster. You're
Yeah.
like,
It's
oh,
tough.
guys,
It is very,
no,
very difficult. Taking a brilliant idea and compressing it into a 1 minute video is a very difficult exercise in any language. In your native language, that's a very difficult exercise, right?
yeah,
And that's one of the things that I think Phil is absolutely brilliant at. And that's why he's been so successful throughout his career at raising money and that kind of a thing.
uh-huh,
Is he's very good at taking complex ideas, distilling them down into ultimate simplicity, but very elegant simplicity, and
incredible.
then being good at presenting. I think presenting is a skill. I think, regardless, take the language thing out of it, but presenting is a skill that is really important because, as we all know, everyone knows this that's in the startup world. VCs are judging you, and angel investors are judging you as an entrepreneur first. The
Yeah,
idea is second, right? I've seen so many crappy ideas actually become successful, or moderately successful, just because of the entrepreneur, right? And venture capitalists know this. They're betting on the entrepreneur. So I think figuring out how to present in a compelling way, have hooks, as I call it, hooks that are kind of mental hooks for the venture capitalists to kind of reel them in. It's like fishing, right? Like you're reeling them into what the reality that you want to create. And you have to be dynamic. You have to be energetic. You have to show that enthusiasm, because let me tell you, from a venture capital perspective, and I started in venture capital,
yeah,
if you don't have an enthusiastic entrepreneur, no one else is going to be enthusiastic about your idea, right? Like you have to be the creator of that enthusiasm. You have to be kind of the nucleus
yeah.
of that enthusiasm. And that's
Oh,
what
I
they're
love
looking
it. Beautifully put. Yeah, totally. So I noticed that in our audience, mostly we have either founders and people who want to build their businesses and potentially raise capital, etc., or people who want to have successful career in international companies. So do you have advice, ideas talking about typical mistakes that people in this two fields are doing?
Yeah. So I talk a lot about hiring, especially when I was able to travel and speak at conferences and whatnot. One of the biggest questions I get from international offices, international events is,
yeah,
how do I get hired on at, a hot startup, right? Like
yeah.
how do I get hired on? There's two things. How do I get hired on at Google or Facebook, right? Is kind of a natural thing,
yeah,
which is a totally different thing. And frankly, I'm not at all remotely interested in that.
yeah.
I have some tips of kind of how to do that, but that's a different track. What I get excited about is the younger hot startup that is a breakout, that is experiencing hyper growth, which was Evernote. Weebly was a little bit later stage, I'll say, before we sold to Square. So it wasn't as much hyper growth. But going into the international markets, it was a lot of growth involved with that. But I would say if you're looking at getting on at a hot startup company, the first thing that I like to say is start identifying the companies you want to work for by looking in your market for what is growing, right?
Yeah.
Like what are the breakout companies that are happening right now? One company that I think of is Notion, actually one that I know you're using. They're at a perfect stage right now where they are growing extremely quickly in the international markets. I know Asia is exploding for them. So when you find a company like that, then it's figuring out how to network and get some sort of a warm lead. And with LinkedIn, this becomes easier and easier, but finding a warm lead into a company like that. And then here's the biggest thing that I find as I hire internationally, the biggest frustration to me is that most everyone, especially in Asia, and I think less so Europe, but Asia particularly, it's so competitive and everyone looks the same on paper. So your resume is not as important as it was in the past, right? Yeah. So the ability for you to tell a compelling story, the ability for you to be different and reach out to these companies in a compelling way, I think is a game changer and differentiates you from all the other people. One of the things that I always talk about in Asia in particular, and I think this is also especially with Eastern Bloc countries as well as in Latin America. And it goes to this formal kind of thing.
Yeah.
Don't be robotic. Like being robotic is the worst thing you can do when you're looking to get on at an innovative company. Robotic is great if you want to go work for like Samsung or a big conglomerate, right? Like a big company. You can be robotic and you're fine because innovation is not really happening daily. But at a young startup that is growing very quickly, you can't be robotic about it. You have to be thinking on the fly. And I noticed that 90+% of the interviews that I would do, I was in testing them. What I look for is, will you think for yourself? And if I say something that you disagree with, will you tell me and let me know and have that conversation? Because only by having those conversations do we improve and get to the right answer, right?
True. Yeah, absolutely. I can't agree more. And I think this formality and being robotic like goes hand in hand. And it's really, I see a lot of people that, have very successful executive career, like in Eastern Europe, for example. But then it's so hard for them. And there it's all like, suits and ties and like, good morning, good evening. And the startup culture is so different, and it's so hard for them to get their head around and understand how to perform. And on top of that, it's a psychological shift. And on top of that, you have language complexity, because it's not your native language.
That's an added complexity. And I think when you're speaking a second language, you're inherently more cautious. You're more reserved. Exactly. And I want to make a distinction. It's not about like if you have a personality that is just more formal in general, that's fine. But what I'm talking about, I guess I'm talking about formal as people who would be more at home at a larger company and not thinking for themselves as much. Yeah. What I think is vitally important at a startup and what most startups want are people that are willing to share their ideas and have those conversation about those ideas rather than being rigid in their thinking, et cetera. In fact, a good example of this is when I got hired on at Evernote, my first question to my boss, who was from Russia, Dmitry Stavitsky, very intimidating. He's he's like a teddy bear, but he's kind of like huge. He's really tall, Yeah, exactly. He's like Chewbacca, he's like kind of intimidating, but at the same time, he's the nicest person and very analytical thinking, etc. And I asked him when I first got hired on at Evernote, I said, so let's talk KPIs. What are the goals? What are this? And in a company like Evernote that was growing so quickly, you don't know what the KPIs are yet. Yeah. Right. And so his answer to me was, your only KPI is be awesome. Yeah. And that was it. That was it. But what it did is it gave me the freedom to think and make stuff happen and invent and create. Right. Mm-hmm. Which was something that we needed to do. And then after maybe a year, we started talking about, okay, what should the KPIs be? How should we view this business? So if you're uncomfortable in an environment where your boss says, that your KPI is just to be awesome, then that's kind of an indication that you might not be best for the startup life, but you'd be better off in kind of like a larger, more established company. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's two different kinds of DNA many times. Some people are a little different and they can work in both environments, but I think you're either a startup person and kind of that fast growth and innovation type person, or you're more content being in a highly structured environment, right?
Yeah, that's true. Although I have to say that my feeling is with this year specifically has proven us that more and more it becomes important for us to know how to live in the unknown. And, you know, the furthest planning that you can do is like the next month, maybe, because like have no idea. And just being able to still, you know, stick to something and to align and to work together and to kind of, you know, go the same way with the team, even though you don't know what's coming. And then the mission and this connections and communication becomes so important, because it's like, you know, they talk about teal organizations now too. It's like an ecosystem. Ecosystems don't plan, they just coexist beautifully somehow. And we still have to like understand how to make the systems, because again, what Taleb is writing in anti-fragility and all of these things, I think that's the companies of today, and we all should kind of strive this way.
Yeah, it's interesting that, I absolutely agree with you. It's a totally different environment. We all need to kind of adapt. It's actually a good environment for someone who speaks English as a second language, from the standpoint of we're much more in the written word now. You know, so I think there's an enhanced kind of ability to just get better at the written word. And then with Zoom meetings, you know, there's things that you can do in a Zoom meeting that you can't do in person, right? Like, I'm a big advocate for preparing for conversations, especially if you're speaking a second language, right? Like, the more you prepare for that business development pitch that you're going to give, and the more notes you have available and the more pre-thought out questions and statements and things like that you have, it's kind of like grease to the conversation. It makes it go smoother, right? And I think in the Zoom era, we have a better opportunity to have access to those kind of tools that can help us in speaking. So it is like a totally different environment. In fact, I was helping someone the other day with a business development pitch, and I was noticing that that's a change, right? Like, normally this would be done in person, and you better be, you know, making eye contact the whole time, et cetera. But with Zoom, you can throw up a slide, gather your thoughts, and then come back, right?
Yeah, or you can have like a second monitor or some notes behind the screen, and it's hard to tell if you're like what you're seeing. Totally.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
100%. I agree 100%. Again, like Y Combinator, 1 minute video, and in all the you know, guidelines, they're like, hey guys, don't prepare, just like be yourself and speak and make this 1 minute video. And I'm like, for immigrant, I don't know. I would say even for native speakers, but for immigrants, you better have your script. You better write it and, you know, consult like the smartest people you can find, so that this 1 minute, and then you practice it so that it looks like it's, you know, spontaneous.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, that's right. That's right. That is a big challenge, because you have to learn the linguistic part first and get comfortable with it. And only until you get comfortable with it can you be natural, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard to be 100% natural. If I was doing this interview in Korean, I would be thinking a lot more about constructing my language. But so that's a challenge. I'm very familiar with that challenge.
This like the flow and energy, and this is what excites people, like you said, you know, this like spark that you have. You can only have it when the language and what you need to say is kind of out of the way, especially when it's a form 1 minute video.
You know what? Exactly. And I was just going to say, like, one of the experiences that I've had with language, like speaking Korean. So I started to notice that if I had a speech in Korea or, you know, if I was speaking at a conference or whatever, if I didn't have like a lot of jet lag, I would give most all of the presentation in Korean.
Yeah.
But when I had jet lag, I couldn't. And I would just inject Korean words into a predominantly English conversation,
Sure.
right? So
Yeah.
it's interesting how that affects you as well. So if you're doing Y Combinator and you're coming over to the States to do that, like just keep that in mind, that you're going to have some jet lag that you need to deal with. So getting in a little bit earlier is helpful. But yeah, that's one thing I noticed with my language is that with jet lag, I could not do a big kind of like in front of 1,000 people presentation, mostly all in Korean.
Yeah.
I would go to English as a crutch.
Yeah, you know, that reminds me of my actually singing lessons. And I remember like each time I have a singing lesson and my voice teacher is kind of, hi, Fedor. Oh, you had a late night yesterday. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah. And you can't hide it and you can't do anything with it because this is just your physiology. This is how your body works. Like, and then I had a student who was an opera singer and I was amazed. They live like monks. Their life is so restricted because they have to take care of the instrument, and the instrument is so easily affected by anything, wrong food, going to bed late, like they just don't do this thing.
They're like athletes. You got to take care of that.
Our brain is also like for a founder, this is the main organ that has to be in good shape.
You're exactly right. That's totally true. So before you're presenting, make sure you're in good health and you are rested for sure.
True. And we oftentimes, we're so, carried away by building, etc. We forget about that, our bodies need sleep and rest and air and all of these things. Yeah, that's really.
And just one thing that's coming to me, just thinking that there might be people that are thinking about pitching on this live stream. One of my biggest recommendations is when you're coming up with that minute video or whatever it is, like storytelling is so vitally important to us as a human race connecting, right? And I think that don't think of your pitch as you're pitching a technology, you're pitching, a lot of engineers get very deep into the technology and think that that is the biggest thing. Think about the human connection of your product and dig into that story, because that story that you should be able to tell really well and very clearly is the emotional connection between an investor and your company. So storytelling, I want people to think about storytelling as opposed to just a pitch. A pitch has kind of the connotation that you're trying to convince someone to give you money, right?
Yeah.
And I think rather than thinking about it like that, think about like you're on a journey to change the world. That's an epic thing. That's a big deal. So make your company and everything that you're doing into why does this mean so much to you and how are you going to change the world, and turn that into your kind of like hero's journey, if you will, that you can tell in a very compelling way. And all the details can be dealt with later as far as like, well, how does this work? And all of that's going to come later. But if you only have a minute, you need a deeply emotional connection to happen between you and some investor in order to get that second meeting, in order to get to the point where you can actually dig into the details of what you're doing. And I think where I see a lot of people go wrong is we have this saying in the US, just the facts, ma'am. It comes from a TV show way back when, these cops that were talking to people and they would always say, just the facts, ma'am. And I think people give their pitches like that, just the facts, like this is it. This is what I'm doing. This is how it's going to work, blah, blah, blah. That is boring, right? You see that every day, in and out. But if you can come in and get an emotional connection and put a story behind what you're doing, and we did this at Evernote. I say we liberally. Phil is a master at this. but we created a movement at Evernote, not just an app. Like people were emotional and still are very emotional about Evernote, the brand, and what Evernote meant to them in their human journey, right? And if you can get to that point, that's what I would ask you, like, think about that aspect of storytelling when you're putting something together. And that's going to help you stand above most everyone else, because everyone gets up and does a typical pitch, right? There's templates for pitches. Have a freaking story that you can have an emotional connection with the audience on, and that's going to serve you much better.
Yeah. Wow, Troy, thank you so much. I am dreaming about bringing some of the founders that we know to you so that they can have conversation with you, ask their question, and maybe even, show you their 1 minute pitch, and then, So if at all this can happen, I would definitely invite, all the tribe. And I think that could be awesome, because talking to you is such a joy. And I can't agree more with everything that you're saying.
Thank you. Yeah, I love these kind of conversations. This is fun for me. It's something that I've built my career on, and always love to help and give back. And that's why we did the product studio, that Phil did the product studio. All Turtles was really to give back the knowledge that we've gained over the years, to be able to share that with kind of younger entrepreneurs that are coming up and trying to figure out the equation of how to make it all work. So that's fun for me.
I love it. And I like, if there's one thing that's left after this conversation, create a movement, not like a product. Think about how this is a worldwide movement, what you're making. I think it's such a wonderful perspective, and this can change a lot of things. So let's talk and figure out how we can have the next meeting, maybe inviting people over. And I'll be sharing links to that.
Okay. Yeah. And I think what we were talking about is, this is obviously kind of more you and I talking, but I think it makes a lot of sense to open this up to the community so that people can ask questions and kind of get their particular questions answered. Well, I'm not the definitive answer, but I am a voice, and I have, some interesting experience that may be helpful in some cases. So yeah, I think doing more of an open format where people can actually ask questions specific to what they're thinking or what they need to accomplish, I think that would be really fun. I really enjoy that. And in fact, this is something that I am used to doing. I'm used to like speaking at a conference, especially like startup related conference. And then after I speak, I'll take questions for like 30 minutes. And that's so fun, because you never know what's on people's minds and what they're thinking about. And I love doing that. But now with COVID and everything, I can't really travel efficiently. Anywhere I go, I'd have to be quarantined for 14 days, it seems like. So in the absence of being able to do that kind of format, let's take it virtual. Let's do this in a format where we can actually do this on Zoom. I think that'd be awesome.
Perfect. Okay. So more info on that coming soon.
Cool.
It was an absolute joy. A wonderful morning.
Yep.
And let's get on with our day. And I will also definitely share this video with our communities, because I think there's a lot of insights, and looking forward to doing things together.
Definitely. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you soon. Okay.
See ya.
Okay. Bye.
Ciao.